Bakery clock ticked softly in the early hours, its rhythmic tock-tock-tock blending with the soft hum of ovens, the clink of trays, and the occasional burst of laughter from the back room. It was just past 6 a.m., and Sana was already on her third batch of kneaded dough. Fire dust floated like morning mist, and sunlight crept gently through the frosted glass panels of NOUR. The air, as always, smelled like warmth. But this morning was different. A soft knock at the glass door drew Sana's attention. It wasn't a customer. It was a courier, holding a gold-embossed envelope. "For Miss Sana Aftab," he said, bowing slightly. She wiped her hands on her apron and took the envelope. It was thick, heavy, formal. Inside was an invitation, lettered in elegant calligraphy. "You are cordially invited to the National Women of Vision Awards 2025. In recognition of your extraordinary resilience, leadership, and contribution to women's empowerment and sustainable enterprise, you will be honored as the Changemaker of the Year. Venue, Serena Grand Hall, Islamabad. Date, March 14th, 7 p.m. Sana's hands trembled. The words blurred for a moment. She hadn't read her full name in print for years. She hadn't thought anyone in power knew she even existed. She sat on the bakery stool for a long moment, stunned. Later that day, she gathered her team. The women squealed in joy when she told them. Bushra jumped and hugged her so hard she nearly dropped a tray of eclairs. "You're going to be on TV," Hannah shrieked. "They'll see what we already know," Fatima added, "that you are the heart of this place." Zara appeared later with a dress bag and a knowing smirk. "Rema knew this would happen one day," she said, hanging the garment bag on a hook. "He told me to have this made a month ago." Sana blinked. "He knew before me." Zara shrugged. "He sees people long before the world does." The award night was a world apart. The Serena Grand Hall sparkled like a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers, marbled floors, floral arrangements that looked like blooming stars. People walked in gowns and tuxedos, cameras flashing, journalists whispering. Sana had never felt so out of place in her life. She stood at the edge of the red carpet, heart pounding. She wore a deep emerald dress, stitched with subtle gold embroidery, elegant, graceful, modest. Her hair was tied in a simple braid, adorned with a single jasmine flower, a nod to her mother. Danielle stood beside her, holding her hand proudly. In a miniature black suit. As they entered, people began to notice. The media shifted. Someone whispered her name, then cameras turned. Then the crowd. And suddenly, the woman once invisible, the one who had begged for leftovers outside cafes, was now the center of a ballroom filled with society's most powerful voices. On stage, a host began narrating her story. A slideshow played behind them, clips of the shelter, the first batch of cupcakes, the chalkboard wish wall, photos of her team working shoulder to shoulder. One image stood out. Sana, rolling dough with Danielle sitting in the background, coloring with a crayon. Applause began even before her name was called. When Sana walked onto the stage, the spotlight hit her squarely in the chest. She could barely breathe. The award was handed to her. A crystal plaque etched with her name and the words, "Changemaker of the Year." The hall waited for her to speak. She stepped up to the mic, her voice shaking. "I once begged for food," she began quietly, "and people walked past me like I didn't exist. I thought the world had no space left for people like me, women who had fallen, women who had lost everything." She paused, but someone, one person, saw me, not with pity, but with belief. He gave me not charity, but opportunity. And that changed everything. She scanned the crowd, found Remen in the back, not smiling, just nodding, proud and invisible. "As always, this award is not mine," she continued. "It belongs to every woman who's been told she's finished, to every mother who puts her child's meal before her own, to every survivor who still dreams." The applause was thunderous. That night, Sana received not just an award, but something she didn't know she still needed: recognition. The kind that reached into your childhood and rewrote the part of you that once felt unworthy. The following week was a storm. News outlets ran her story. Talk shows invited her. Celebrities tweeted about her bakery. Orders tripled. The shelter saw a 40% rise in inquiries. More women began applying to join the baking program. One message, however, stood out. It was a voice note. Soft, broken, familiar. "Sana, it's your cousin, Mewish. We saw you on TV. Mama cried all night. We're sorry for what we said, what we didn't say. If you ever want to visit, our home is open. Please forgive us. Sana sat with that message in silence. She wasn't angry. She had no space left for bitterness, but she had learned something. People only see what shines. Rarely do they honor the journey before the light. That Sunday, Sana visited her old street, the place where she once sat on the sidewalk holding Danielle in her arms. She stood silently by the cafe that had ignored her once. A homeless woman sat in her old spot. Then, holding a child, asking for food. Sana walked over, knelt, and touched her shoulder. Come with me, she whispered. I'll feed your child, and then we'll talk about your future. The woman wept. Sana didn't cry. She just smiled. She had been here before, and she knew the way out. The world outside had changed. From the windows of Nur, Sana could now see not just crowds, but community. There were families waiting in lines, children drawing on the chalkboard wall, students doing their homework in the corner seats. The bakery had become more than just a business. It had become a sanctuary. But even sanctuaries can carry silent storms. One morning, Daniel came to her, his face pale. It was early, before school. He held out a piece of paper, crumpled from being clutched tightly. I found this, he said softly, under your pillow. Sana's heart still. She took the paper and unfolded it slowly. It was her old letter, the one she'd written during the worst of her homeless days. A goodbye letter, her suicide note. She hadn't realized it still existed. Her breath caught as she read the familiar words, now faded but burned into memory. To whoever finds this, I tried. I gave everything I had. I begged. I cried. I swallowed my pride. But I can't watch my son suffer anymore. If there's any mercy left in this world, let someone love him, feed him, let him live. Tell him I loved him with everything I had. I'm sorry, Sana. She looked up at Daniel. His eyes brimmed with tears. He wasn't old enough to fully understand. You were going to leave me? He asked, his voice cracking. No, she whispered. I was lost, but I didn't do it. I stayed for you. Why? She pulled him close. Because something inside me still believed that maybe life could change, that maybe there was still a door out of the darkness. I didn't know where it was, but I knew I had to keep walking for you. He hugged her tightly. I'm glad you stayed, he whispered into her chest. That letter haunted her for days, not because of the pain it carried, but because she realized how many others still carried the same weight. How many women still stood on the edge of desperation, just one step away from giving up. So she decided to do something radical. She gathered her team one afternoon and said, I want to start something new, a campaign, a nationwide one, something bold. I want to call it Stay. The women blinked. Stay, yes, she said firmly, stay alive, stay strong, stay for your child, your dream, your second chance. We tell our stories, not just the sweet ones, but the raw, painful truths, the nights we almost gave up, and how we didn't. It wasn't easy. Some women hesitated. Sharing vulnerability on camera was terrifying. Others feared judgment. But slowly, they agreed. One by one, they sat in front of a camera, eyes raw, voices shaking, and said the truth. I stayed because my daughter smiled at me once, and I knew I had to see her grow. I stayed because I found a hand reaching out when I thought I was invisible. I stayed because I believed I deserved better, even if no one else did. The campaign launched on Women's Day. Within 24 hours, it went viral. Hashtag stayed trended across Pakistan and beyond. Women from villages, cities, even overseas, posted their own reasons for staying. It became more than a campaign. It became a movement. TV channels picked it up. NGOs contacted NER for collaboration. Universities invited Sana to speak. But more importantly, shelters across the country reported an increase in walk-ins. Women who said, I saw the video. I want to stay too. Sana was overwhelmed. She hadn't set out to be a leader. She had just wanted to survive. But sometimes survivors are the best architects of hope. Then something unexpected happened. One afternoon, Zara walked in holding a letter. It's from Remen, she said, quietly. Sana frowned. Why didn't he give it to me himself? He's gone, Zara said gently. Left the country last week. Medical treatment. He didn't want a farewell. Sana took the letter slowly. Inside was a short note, written in his steady, familiar hand. Sana, you once asked why I helped you. The truth is, I saw myself in you. My mother was you, strong, starving, searching. She once left a letter to, a goodbye note, but a stranger helped her stay. You didn't need saving. You just needed a mirror. And now you become that mirror for others. I never wanted fame. I just wanted change. And you are change. The bakery is yours. The foundation will follow. Your lead, whatever light I sparked, you turned into a lighthouse. Keep shining. Ramazana sat in the bakery's back room for a long time, holding the letter. She thought of that night on the street, the bitter wind, the shame, the hunger, and then of now, the warmth of the ovens, the laughter in the hallway, her son's crayon drawings pinned on the walls. She whispered, "Thank you." Though Raymond wasn't there to hear it, maybe he never needed to. That week, Nur began a new program. Every cake box now included a sealed envelope labeled, "For the woman who feels like giving up." Inside was a printed message, different each time, from one of the bakery's women. Raw, real, redemptive. Some cried when they read it. Some called back and ordered 10 more boxes. One woman wrote back, "Your letter saved my life. I was going to end it that night. I stayed because of you." And so, the letter once written in despair became the spark of hundreds more written in hope. For the first time in years, Sama stood on the threshold of a door she could call her own. Not a shelter, not a bakery backroom, not someone's borrowed space, but an actual home, a real one, with a key that clicked into a lock that belonged to her, with walls that didn't echo with borrowed time, and a roof that wasn't held up by charity, but by choice. It was small, just 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a modest kitchen, and a narrow balcony that overlooked the bustling street market. Below, but to Sana and Danielle, it might as well have been a palace. When she opened the door, she let him step in first. He looked around, wide-eyed, at the still empty rooms, the whitewashed walls, the sunlight falling through gauzy curtains that fluttered with the spring breeze. "Where's the bed?" he asked. "We'll get one tomorrow." She smiled. "Tonight, we sleep on the floor, together." He laughed. "Like camping, exactly like camping." That night, they lay on a pair of thin mattresses placed on the tiled floor, surrounded by unopened boxes. The lights were dim. The window was open. Sana watched her son fall asleep, breathing peacefully, his arms wrapped around an old stuffed lion from the shelter. She stared at the ceiling for a long time and cried, not tears of fear or hunger, but tears of quiet gratitude, of peace, of arrival. Moving into a home brought a different kind of change, a new rhythm, a new heartbeat. In the mornings, she made prathas in her own kitchen, with a gas stove that flickered and hissed like a song. Danielle had a small study corner where he kept his books and colored pencils. She bought a rug, then curtains, then a tea set that matched, even though it cost her almost a full shift's. She framed their first photo together in front of her. It hung beside the front door, a reminder that they'd built this life one crumb at a time. Neighbors were kind. A retired school teacher lived upstairs and offered to tutor Danielle for free. A young couple next door shared their internet connection. The building's chowkara brought her chai during rainy days. They didn't ask for her story. They just accepted her, which, in many ways, was even more healing. But home was not just a space. It was a concept, and for Sana, it had always felt elusive. She decided to create something that reflected what Nur had given to her and so many others, not just a bakery, not just a paycheck, but a sense of home. She began working on a new project, a residential training center for displaced women and children. The bakery had already proven the model: empower with skills, restore dignity, and watch miracles happen. But now she wanted permanence. She met with government officials, architects, donors. She pitched a vision: a small community center with housing for 20 women and their children, a school inside, a therapy room, and a kitchen to run small-scale bakery production for women who were still in training. She called it Manzel. The destination. It wasn't easy. Bureaucracy moved slowly. Funding was tight. She stayed up late reading policy papers and drafting proposals. Danielle would fall asleep on the couch with his books while she reviewed land lease agreements with Zara over tea. But slowly, piece by piece, brick by brick, it began to happen. They secured a plot on the outskirts of the city. Construction began that summer. She visited the site every morning before bakery hours, watching the foundation being laid, walls rising like hope solidifying from dust. When the first room was painted, she brought Danielle with her. He dipped his hand in blue paint and pressed it against the wall. Sana did the same. The pound prints, mother and son, forever etched into the heart of a home built from brokenness. As Mansell grew, so did her sense of purpose. The women who entered the training program now came not just to learn a trade, but to live. Each room had a small mirror with a handwritten note pasted beside it. You are not invisible here. Sana gave them all the same orientation she had once received. Only now, she added her own chapter. She stood before each new batch of women and said, "You are not here to be fixed. You are not broken. You are here to remember. Remember who you were before the world convinced you otherwise." One woman burst into tears during her first week. Sana sat beside her and offered her tea. "I can't believe someone made space for me," the woman whispered. Sana smiled. "We don't make space. We just remind you it was always yours." Life settled into a gentle rhythm. Bakery in the morning, home by dusk. Site visits on weekends. School meetings with Danielle. Occasional speaking events. Long walks on quiet streets with coffee in hand. She even joined a book club. Sana was no longer surviving in a story. She was writing one. One evening, she found Danielle working on a school essay. Topic is, who inspires you and why? He mumbled, and who are you writing about? He blushed. You, he said, because you made home out of nothing. She ruffled his hair. No, Jan, we made it, but not everything was picture perfect. There were still setbacks. A bakery staff member relapsed and had to be readmitted to rehab. A government grant for Mansell was delayed. The city's economy tightened and orders dipped for 2 months. There were power outages, supplier issues. Nights when she felt the weight of every story ever whispered to her in the shelter halls. But she had learned one thing very clearly. Home isn't a place where nothing bad happens. It's a place where bad things are survived. Together, that truth became her anchor. On the anniversary of Mansell's founding, they held a small ceremony. Just the women, their children, the bakery staff, some volunteers. No press, no speeches, just music, laughter, homemade biryani, and candles lining the corridor's dot as the sun set. Sana stood in the courtyard, watching the golden light spill across the painted walls. Zara walked up beside her. "You've built an empire." Sana laughed softly. "It's just a house." "No," Zara said. "It's a world." The winds changed, not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually. Like a chill creeping through the cracks of a house you thought was finally warm enough to hold out the cold. That year, winter arrived earlier than usual. The city's skies grayed, and the days grew shorter. But it wasn't just the weather. Remen was dying. Sana received a call from Zara one morning just before the bakery opened. "It's his lungs," she said. "Stage 4. He didn't tell anyone until now. He's back in the country, wants to see you." Sana sat down, stunned. The air around her dimmed. She hadn't spoken to him in over a year, not since the letter, not since Mansell had started to rise. She remembered the last time she saw him, his usual calm, his quiet gaze that always saw 10 steps ahead. How could that presence fade? How could a man like Remen leave? She booked a ticket the next day. He lived in a quiet hill station now, far from the noise of the cities he once helped reshape. His cottage was modest, with ivy creeping across the stones and the smell of pine always hanging in the air. When Sana arrived, she expected to find him in a hospital bed, but there he was, sitting on a wooden bench, wrapped in a shawl, sipping tea like it was any other day. "Still stubborn," she said, approaching. He smiled weakly. "Still soft-hearted," he replied. She sat beside him. For a long time, they said nothing. Just watched the wind weave through the trees. Then he spoke. "You made something I couldn't." "What do you mean?" "I built companies, markets, policies. But you built people." She looked down at her hands. "I had to. I was one of them." He nodded slowly. "I never told you what pushed me to help you that day," he said. "Do you remember the white handkerchief I gave you?" "Yes," she whispered. "You knelt beside me." "I did it because my mother once died in the street," he said softly. "Alone, forgotten. And I never got to kneel for her." Santa's breath caught. "She had me when she was just a girl. Worked 2 jobs. Got sick. No one helped her. I was taken in by a distant uncle. Sent to school. Built my life on her bones. But I never forgave myself for not seeing her pain until it was too late." He turned to Sana, eyes glassy. "When I saw you and your son, I saw her. I thought, maybe I could rewrite the end of her story through you. Sana reached over and held his hand. You did, she said. You saved more than me. You saved hundreds. He shook his head. No, I just passed the torch. You carried it. They spent the rest of the day sipping tea, remembering. He asked about Danielle, about the women, about Mansell. She told him everything. Every success, every breakdown, every name of the women, who now stood tall because of a kitchen and a little faith. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, casting golden light through the pines, he handed her a file. This is the deed to a plot of land in Moulton. He said, my family's old farmhouse. I want it to become Mansell South, a second center. Keep building. Sana stared at him, eyes wide. Raymond, I won't be here to build it, he said, but you will. He passed away 5 weeks later. Quietly, alone, by choice, he had left instructions. No lavish funeral, no marble tomb, just a tree planted in his name and a small plaque that read, he believed in people who were told they didn't matter. Sana didn't attend the official ceremony. Instead, she held her own dot in her kitchen. With every woman he'd helped, every child he'd indirectly fed, every life he'd touched. They baked that night, not for customers, but for remembrance, honey cardamom bread, his favorite. They placed it on the windowsill as the first snow began to fall outside. Sana felt his loss like a quiet absence, not loud grief, but something gentler. She wore white for a week. She didn't cry much. She didn't collapse. But every time she needed dough, she remembered his hands placing that white handkerchief into hers. Every time she saw a woman hesitate before stepping into Mansell, she whispered silently, you're seen, just like I was. And in that quiet continuity, he lived on. 1 month later, she took Danielle to Moulton. The land was vast. Dry earth, empty barns, mango trees asleep for winter. Sana stood in the middle of the field and closed her eyes. She saw it. Dormitories, a school, a garden where women could grow their own food, a courtyard filled with laughter, a small library, a candlelit bakery, Mansell South. She turned to her son. What do you think? He squinted at the sun. It needs paint. She laughed. It needs everything, she said, and we'll give it. Back in the city, Sana continued her routine. But winter felt different this time. Not cruel. Just honest. It reminded her that even joy carries shadows, that even home can still ache, that even the strongest hearts have quiet moments of breaking. But she was no longer afraid of the breaking, because she knew how to rebuild. The email arrived on a Thursday morning. Subject line, United Nations Global Forum on Social Justice. Keynote speaker invitation. Sana nearly dropped her tea. She read it again, then a third time, then called Zara. They want me to speak. In Geneva, she whispered, me. There was silence on the line for a second. Then Zara laughed. Why are you surprised? You become the voice for women who never had one. The days that followed blurred into motion. Paperwork, visa arrangements, pre-speech interviews, a wardrobe consultation. Mine is simple, elegant, grounded. She chose a deep blue shower camise, stitched with silver thread. She refused to wear a suit. She would not pretend to be something she wasn't. Danielle beamed when she told him, the United Nations, Mama, you're going to speak for the whole world. No, Beta, she smiled, ruffling his hair, just for the ones who were never allowed to speak before. Geneva was cold in a different way than Pakistan. Not harsh, not survival-driven, but sterile. White snow, clean streets, shiny buildings. It looked like a place where nothing ever went wrong. And yet, here Sana was, invited to tell the world how wrong things can get and how they can be made right again. The UN Assembly Hall was massive. Rows of polished seats. Delegates from every corner of the globe. Press, translators, policymakers, billionaires, activists, presidents. She sat backstage, heart pounding like a drum, clutching the small note card where she'd written for lines. Not a speech, just an anchor. A woman approached. A translator. Would you like your speech interpreted in French and Arabic? She asked gently. Sana shook her head. I will speak in English, but I will speak like a mother. Let that translate. When her name was called, she walked slowly to the podium. She didn't look up at first. She looked at the microphone, at her hands, at the polished wood. She remembered every table she had ever wiped down for scraps, every gutter she had sat beside, Every night she had cried silently so Danielle wouldn't wake up. Then she looked up. Hundreds of eyes stared back. She began, "When I was 27, I considered taking my own life on a sidewalk. A collective stillness swept the room. I had a son in my arms, a suicide note in my pocket, and hunger in my bones. I was invisible, a ghost among the living, and the world did not care." She paused, but someone did. A stranger knelt beside me and offered a hand, not to lift me up, but to remind me I still have the strength to stand. Today, I stand before you not as a policy expert or a CEO, but as proof that a single act of compassion can rewrite the ending of a human life. She told them everything. About Nur, the bakery that rose from bruised hands. About Mansell, the sanctuary that birthed second chances. About Remen, the man who passed the torch without asking for applause. About Danielle, the boy who gave her a reason to breathe when she had none. "We are here to talk about social justice," she said toward the end. "But justice is not a word. It's a choice, and sometimes it begins not in Parliament, but in kitchens, in shelters, in the whispered stories of women who were never supposed to survive." The hall was silent. And then it wasn't. A slow, rising applause grew into thunder. Sana stepped back from the podium, not overwhelmed, not humbled, but fulfilled, because for the first time, she had told her truth, not as a victim, not as a symbol, but as a voice. That night, she stood at her hotel window, looking out over the Geneva skyline. The city sparkled, distant and cold, but within her, something had ignited, a knowing, a peace. She picked up her phone. Texted Zara, "We need to launch the international branch." Zara replied in seconds, "Already working on it. Canada, UK, and South Africa are interested." Sana smiled. It was beginning. Back home, she was greeted at the airport by dozens of women from the shelter, holding banners that read, "You spoke for us, our voice, our sister, our Sana." Danielle ran into her arms, holding a sign he'd made himself, "My mama greater than the UN." She laughed until she cried. Then they all walked home. The next few months unfolded like magic. International donors funded expansion. Nur opened its first overseas kitchen in Birmingham, UK, led by the Pakistani sisters who had once been homeless in East London. A second followed in Toronto, a third planned for Nairobi. Sana didn't visit them all. She didn't need to. The model was simple: dignity first, profit second, humanity always. She did, however, keep writing. Letters to the women, letters to the girls she'd never meet, letters to herself. One day, she sat in the bakery with a volunteer from France. A young woman asked, "What was the hardest part of your journey?" Sana thought for a moment, then replied, "Believing I deserved to come out of the darkness." By now, Nur was more than a bakery. It was a symbol, a living, breathing monument to second chances. Mothers brought their daughters to visit it like a shrine. Students wrote thesis papers about its impact. The Ministry of Social Welfare used its model as a case study for urban empowerment, and yet Sana never let it lose its soul. She still arrived at 6 a.m. every morning. She still helped roll the dough. She still brewed chow when someone was having a bad day. And every Friday, without fail, she sat on the bench outside the bakery for 1 hour. No phone, no meetings, just watching the street. It was during one of those Fridays that she first noticed her, a girl, maybe 13, thin, dirty hands, sitting on the staircase across the road, barefoot. She wasn't begging. She wasn't crying. She just sat there, quietly watching. Every Friday, same time, Sana observed her over several weeks. Each time, the girl wore the same clothes, a faded pink shower kameez with holes at the elbow. Her hair was uncombed, her eyes too large for her face. Had that specific kind of emptiness Sana knew far too well. One afternoon, Sana crossed the street. The girl stood up immediately, ready to flee. "It's okay," Sana said gently. "I just want to talk." The girl said nothing. Sana sat on the stair below her. "I used to sit like this too," she said. "A long time ago, I used to watch people walk past. I didn't want anything. I just wanted to know if they ever noticed me." The girl's lips trembled. "They didn't," she whispered. Sana turned to her. "But I do." That broke her. She burst into sobs, covering her face with thin hands. Her knees pulled to her chest. Sana didn't move, just sat beside her, hand resting gently on the girl's shoulder. Her name was Roshni. She had run away from home a year ago. An abusive uncle, a mother that broke in to protect her. She'd been sleeping under a fruit cart in the alley, washing dishes at a dhaba for leftover roti. Sana took her and no paperwork, no questions, just warmth, a hot bath, a meal. Roshni didn't speak for 3 days, but when she finally did, it was over cupcakes. These taste like I'd. She whispered. Everyone laughed out from that day on. She began to bloom, awkwardly, hesitantly, like a flower that had grown in a crack between bricks. Not realizing it was still allowed to open, Sana gave her a place at Manzil. At first. She resisted routine, skipped therapy, avoided school, but she loved the kitchen, the mixing, the measuring, the stillness of baking. Flour doesn't yell, she said once. She was fast, focused, always humming old Bollywood songs under her breath. Sana began assigning her small tasks, kneading, icing, filling orders. Soon, she had her own apron, with Roshi stitched across the chest. But something still lingered, a shadow, a wall. One evening, Sana found her sitting alone in the storeroom, back against a flour sack, silently crying. Tell me, Sana said gently. Roshni wiped her nose on her sleeve. They said I was dirty, she whispered, that I'd never be clean again. Sana knelt in front of her. I was told the same thing, she said. So I scrubbed and scrubbed. My skin bled, my soul bled, and then one day, someone handed me dough instead of judgment. She held Roshni's hand. This isn't just flour, she said. It's forgiveness. Roshni became a light. Ironically, her name meant just that. She grew louder, braver, tied her hair in neat braids, wrote poetry in the corners of old receipts, hugged Daniel every time she saw him like he was her own brother. On her 15th birthday, the women threw her a surprise party. She cried when they gave her a necklace, a silver pendant with a little rolling pin charm. For our baker of hope, they said. Months passed. Then, one day, Roshni came to Sana with a folded paper. I want to speak, she said. Speak. At the new bakery opening. Tell my story. Sana's breath caught. Are you sure? She nodded. If you could do it at the UN, maybe I can do it for a room. At the opening of Nurse South, Roshni stood on a small stage before a room of journalists, donors, and community members. She wore a green dupatta. Her voice trembled. But she spoke. I was invisible. A girl with nothing, and I thought that meant I was nothing. Then I found a staircase, and a woman who sat beside me without asking me to speak first. Now, I bake hope, and I believe every broken girl can rise. The applause was small, but the silence that came before it was enormous. It meant she had been heard. Later that night, Sana gave her a journal. Inside was a note. Write it all down. You're going to need it someday. You have more to say than most people will ever dare to. Roshni smiled. For the first time, her smile had no fear behind it. It had been 10 years since the sidewalk. 10 years since Sana had begged for leftovers beneath blinking cafe lights. Since the wind bit through her threadbare shawl and her son cried with hunger against her chest. Now, the calendar said April 14, and the city had bloomed into spring. The bakery buzzed, as usual, with morning laughter and clattering pans. Roshni led a workshop for new interns. Daniel, now 17, rode his bicycle to his after-school coding club, backpack bouncing behind him. Zara had semi-retired, though she still stopped by every other day just to yell at the staff. For fun, Manzil was thriving. 2 campuses, fully operational, and a 3rd under construction in Kedah. They had helped over 1,100 women rebuild their lives. There were now kitchens in 5 countries. Sana had spoken at Oxford, WEF, and the African Women's Forum in Dakar. But that morning, she woke before dawn and walked alone. To the street where it all began. The sidewalk, the broken curb, the quiet corner outside that cafe that had since changed ownership 3 times. She stood where she once sat. The cold no longer pierced her skin. The hunger no longer clawed her belly. But the memory, it was still sharp, still vivid. And then, across the street, she saw her, a woman, thin, holding a child, wrapped in the kind of shame Sana remembered all too well. Their eyes met. Sana crossed the road without a word, kneeled before her. Not with pity, but with recognition. Are you hungry? She asked. The woman nodded. Sana took off her shawl and wrapped it around her shoulders. There's a place. Come with me. And so, just like before, just like Remen once did for her, she began the cycle again. That afternoon, when she returned to the bakery, a young documentary filmmaker awaited her. He was working on a project called Cities of Change. "Can I interview you?" he asked. "Only if you let me bake while we talk," she replied, laughing. They filmed her while she made saffron SHO or TBREAD at one point. He asked, "What does it feel like to be a symbol of transformation?" She paused, holding the dough in her palm. "I'm not a symbol," she said. "I'm a mirror." The filmmaker looked puzzled. Sana wiped her hands on her apron, then pointed toward the women behind her, stirring, laughing, braiding each other's hair. "When women look at me, I don't want them to see what I became. I want them to see what they already are. I am not above them. I am them." Later, the crew asked to film in her home. She agreed. There, in her bedroom, she showed them the one thing she had never shared publicly, the letter, the original one, the suicide note. She had framed it, not to glorify her pain, but to honor her survival. Above it, she had written a single line in Urdu, "Jabs Inagi Thak J, Yad Ragna, Roshni Dum Ho. When life grows tired, remember, you are the light." In the final scenes of the documentary, the filmmaker asked one last question. If you could go back and speak to the version of yourself sitting on that sidewalk, what would you say? Sana stared into the lens for a long moment, then whispered, "Don't give up, not because it'll get better, but because you will get stronger, and one day you'll feed others with the same hands that once trembled in hunger." The film aired globally. People wept. Letters poured in. A woman in Morocco wrote, "Your story made me walk back from a bridge." A girl in Bangladesh sent a photo of her first cake. "I baked because you did." A man in New York donated the funds to build Manzil for, saying, "My mother was you. I never said thank you." Sana's final speech came the following year. It wasn't at a global stage. It was at Manzil Islamabad's graduation ceremony. She stood before 50 women, all former survivors of homelessness, violence, addiction, and abandonment. Each one now wore a chef's apron. Each one now stood tall. Each one now held a certificate stamped with the NER emblem. Sana stood at the podium, looked out at them, and said simply, "You were never broken. You were just waiting for someone to remind you how whole you always were." That night, after everyone left, she returned home and sat in front of her mirror. She lit a candle, looked at herself. Gray now streaked her hair. Fine lines curled around her eyes, but her gaze, steady, soft, powerful, had never been clearer. She smiled, for the first time, not as the woman who had survived, but as the woman who had become a beacon, and in that moment, she whispered to her reflection, "You did it. You saved her."